All right, so today's topic, what we want to talk about today, is the price of selling your practice too early. This comes to a shock to a lot of doctors when they see these slides that you don't really come out ahead selling your practice.
People work on their brain saying things like, oh, we got a whole generation that aren't going to be able to afford to buy a practice, so yours won't, you better sell it while there's still buyers. And you hear all this. So you bail out on what turns out to really be a pretty valuable asset. Here's an example of what we're talking about. Let's assume a doctor is making $500,000 a year, roughly taking home $42,000 a month. That's probably on a gross of 150 to 180. That's a great practice. Mm-hmm. But the valuation, what they might be able to get for that, might only be $750,000 based on rule of thumb multiples. Now that can go up or down, but that's kind of what we see a lot. So this is a normal 18 times monthly net valuation. Sometimes use 50 to 80% of gross. There's all sorts of ones, but this will work for our purposes here. So here's a practice doing well. So let's say this person sells at the peak. They're in their prime. The practice is very desirable. It's updated, and they got buyers. So there you go, $750,000. Let's take a look at what would happen if instead of selling now, you work for 3 more years. So to give you an idea, 3 additional years at $500,000 a year, that'd be $1.5 million. So you'd get another $1.5 million. So you'd get more out of the practice by working than you would for selling it, plus the sale price. So $750, another $750 on top of that. So you'd be way in the black to hang on for 3 more years. But because so often the motivation to sell is energy downgrade, people have less energy, let's assume that the practice dropped to half the take home that you had before. So now you're taking home $250 a year instead of $500,000 a year. So you'd have a sale price of $375, but you would have taken out another $750,000 of inflation-adjusted income, plus your $375. You're still to the good if you keep the practice and the income, the net
drops by half.
I know what you're saying. The first dollars you make are overhead, and so to drop it down, you could be cutting into your net. But some people really have done that well. They slow down, take better cases, and work with fewer staff and do good.
Right.
So you'd have been better off keeping the practice at half the income. All right, so let's look at 5 years down the road. If you stayed at full power for 5 years, you see, you just pull away. There's nothing quite like it. You're going to end up with $2,750,000 of inflation-adjusted income versus getting $750 now. So let's say you stayed in for 5 additional years at half the income. You would end up at $1.2 million of takeout plus $375 for the sale. You'd been $1.5 million, you'd have come out twice as good. Let's say though that you dropped from $500,000 down to $100,000 a year. That's when you would have actually been better off, as you can see here. You'd have been better off selling 5 years before than letting it drift down that far.
So what's the message here for doctors? What would you want them to really understand from this presentation?
Honestly, I would like them to consider the resale value of their practice not quite as high on their priority scale. In other words, it's not about selling your practice for the top dollar. It's about getting the top dollar out of your practice in the form of income.
Right. All right. Thanks for listening.